Commander Jake Martinez stared at the blue marble of Earth through the viewport of Defense Station Olympus, the morning coffee growing cold in his hands as the urgent alarm echoed through the corridors. 3 years of peaceful service orbiting. Humanity's homeworld had made him comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. But the red alert signals now flashing across every screen in the station suggested those quiet days were over. Dr. Lisa Thompson rushed into the command center, her lab coat still bearing traces of the xenobiology samples she had been studying moments before. Her face was pale as she handed Jake a datapad containing the decoded transmission that had arrived just minutes earlier. The message bore the seal of something called the Hegemony, a coalition of 12 alien races that claimed dominion over this entire sector of the galaxy. Ryan Brooks, the communications officer, worked frantically at his console to clean up the alien signal, his fingers dancing across holographic displays as he tried to make sense of the complex mathematical patterns embedded in the transmission. The universal translator was struggling with concepts that seemed to have no human equivalent, but the core message was becoming terrifyingly clear with each passing moment. Admiral Koren, white, materialized on the main display via quantum link. From Earth Defense Command, her weathered face grave as she reviewed the same transmission on her end. Behind her, Jake could see the bustling activity of military personnel preparing for something they had hoped would never come. The day when humanity would face a threat from beyond their small corner of space. The terms laid out in the alien message were simple but devastating in their scope. Earth had exactly 30 standard days to accept what the hegemony called guided peace integration, a process that would fundamentally change everything about human civilization. The alternative was complete subjugation under hegemony military rule, with no guarantee that human culture or even human lives would survive the process. Henry Adams appeared on another screen, the elderly diplomat's usual calm demeanor cracking as he read through the detailed requirements. Humanity would surrender all military assets immediately, submit to hegemony oversight of all technological development, relocate 40% of the human population to designated agricultural worlds, and accept a permanent alien garrison on Earth itself. General Alex Rodriguez joined the conference from Mars Command, his scarred face reflecting years of military service and a deep understanding of what these terms really meant. The aliens were offering humanity junior partner status in their coalition, protection from other hostile species, and the right to continue existing as a civilization, but the price was freedom itself. Dr. Thompson highlighted the most disturbing aspect of the transmission as she analyzed the underlying data streams. The hegemony had been observing humanity for decades, cataloging their strengths and weaknesses, studying their military capabilities and political structures. This was not a spontaneous contact, but a carefully planned annexation. Captain Steve Johnson reported in from the exploration vessel Aurora, currently stationed near the outer colonies, his voice tense as he described the massive alien ships that had appeared on long-range sensors. These were not exploration vessels but military dreadnoughts, positioned strategically around human settlements in a clear demonstration of overwhelming force. The debate that followed was fierce and heated as humanity's leaders grappled with an impossible choice. Adams argued for negotiation, believing that some compromise might be possible given humanity's relatively small presence in galactic affairs. Rodriguez took a harder stance, insisting that surrender would mean the death of everything that made humanity unique. As the hours passed, reports continued flowing in from across human space. The aliens had simultaneously contacted every human colony, every space station, every outpost, delivering the same ultimatum with mathematical precision. There would be no hiding, no running, no pretending this was not happening. Ambassador Zextel arrived at Olympus Station in a vessel that seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves and pulsing surfaces unlike anything in human technology. The towering insectoid creature moved with disturbing grace as it delivered the hegemony's message in person, its translated words carrying undertones of absolute certainty about human compliance. The alien ambassador explained that resistance was not merely futile but unprecedented in hegemony history. Every species they had encountered had either surrendered, immediately upon seeing their overwhelming technological superiority or been conquered within days. The very concept of prolonged resistance seemed foreign to their understanding. Jake watched as Admiral White made the decision that would define humanity's future, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. Earth's response would be transmitted across the galaxy within the hour, carried by quantum communication arrays to every corner of human space and beyond. The message was brief but carried the weight of an entire species' determination. Humanity respectfully declined the hegemony's generous offer, choosing instead to remain free regardless of the consequences. As the transmission ended, Jake realized that the comfortable days of peaceful exploration were over, and humanity was about to face the greatest challenge in its history. 3 weeks after Earth sent its defiant response across the galaxy, the first signs of hegemony retaliation began appearing throughout human space. Pete Williams was checking his crops on New Dakota when massive shadows fell across his fields, blocking out the artificial sun that kept the agricultural colony running. The ships that hung in the sky above his farm were unlike anything humanity had ever built, their surfaces rippling like living skin as they maintained perfect formation. Amy Foster was deep in the mining tunnels of Kepler's Rest when the communication blackout hit, cutting off all contact with Earth and the other colonies. The quantum communication arrays that had connected human settlements across dozens of light years simply went silent, leaving each world isolated and vulnerable. Emergency protocols activated automatically, but without coordination from Earth Defense Command, local commanders could only guess at what was happening back on Earth. General Rodriguez stood in the war room beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the largest military mobilization in human history. Every available ship was being pulled from patrol duty, merchant vessels were being converted into makeshift warships, and civilian factories were retooling to produce weapons and ammunition. The scale of the operation was staggering, but Rodriguez knew it might not be enough. Dr. Thompson worked alongside physicist Craig Anderson in a secure laboratory, pushing the boundaries of human technology in ways that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Their focus was on weaponizing humanity's greatest discovery, the quantum entanglement drives that allowed faster-than-light travel by folding space itself. If they could turn that technology into a weapon, it might give humanity the edge they desperately needed. Captain Johnson led a small reconnaissance fleet toward the edge of human space, hoping to gather intelligence on hegemony forces before the real fighting began. What they discovered when they reached the outer markers was sobering beyond imagination. The alien fleet stretched across light years, thousands of vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed, each one bristling with weapons. Technology that seemed centuries ahead of human engineering. Lieutenant Nicole Carter studied the tactical data from her position aboard the Aurora, her analytical mind working to find patterns in the alien formations. The hegemony ships moved with perfect coordination, their attacks following mathematical precision that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or some form of shared consciousness. Traditional military tactics would be useless against such an enemy. However, Carter began to notice something interesting in the alien behavior patterns. Every hegemony engagement in their historical records followed similar strategies, suggesting they had never faced an unpredictable enemy. Their technological superiority had made them complacent, relying on overwhelming force rather than tactical innovation. This gave her an idea that would change everything. The first human paradox protocols emerged from Carter's analysis, battle strategies so seemingly insane that no logical military computer could predict them. The basic principle was simple, but revolutionary. If you cannot outgun your enemy, you must outthink them in ways they cannot comprehend. Chaos would become humanity's greatest weapon. Meanwhile, civilian populations across Earth were being evacuated to underground cities, vast networks of tunnels and chambers that had been expanded from old Cold War bunkers. Advanced life support systems maintained breathable atmosphere and comfortable temperatures while electromagnetic shielding protected against orbital bombardment. President Martha Bell addressed the world from one of these shelters. Her words broadcast to every human settlement, Her speech was brief but powerful, acknowledging the terrible odds humanity faced while emphasizing their absolute determination to remain free. The aliens had come seeking surrender but would find resolve instead. Every human being, whether soldier or civilian, scientist or farmer, would play a part in the resistance that was to come. Long-range sensors detected the approach of the main hegemony fleet, a massive armada of over 3,000 vessels that could reduce entire planets to molten slag within hours. The ships moved in perfect formation, their biological hulls pulsing with energy as they prepared for what they assumed would be a brief and decisive campaign. Admiral White coordinated the defense from her flagship Liberty, knowing that the upcoming battle would determine whether humanity had any chance of survival. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1. Outgunned by technology they barely understood, but they possessed something the aliens had never encountered in their 3,000 years of conquest. Dr. Thompson made a breakthrough discovery as she studied intercepted hegemony communications, finding that their collective consciousness networks showed signs of confusion when faced with truly random events. The aliens had conquered every species they encountered because those species fought in predictable patterns, following logical military doctrine that could be analyzed and countered. Captain Johnson prepared his squadron for the coming engagement, knowing that many of them would not survive the first contact with alien forces. But their sacrifice would serve a purpose beyond mere resistance, proving to the galaxy that the hegemony could be hurt, that their supposed invincibility was a lie that had gone unchallenged for too long. The asteroid belt became humanity's chosen battleground, a chaotic environment where superior firepower would be partially negated by the need for careful maneuvering. Human ships took positions among the rocky debris, waiting for an enemy that had never experienced anything but total victory in their long history of conquest. As the hegemony fleet approached, Ambassador Zexthel transmitted a final ultimatum, offering humanity one last chance to surrender before facing complete annihilation. The response came not in words but in actions, as human ships powered up their weapons and prepared to fight for their freedom against impossible odds. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt began at 0600 hours, Earth Standard Time, when the hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace directly into the debris field, their massive dreadnoughts moving with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Admiral White watched from the bridge of the Liberty as enemy vessels spread across her tactical display like a plague of metal locusts, their numbers so overwhelming that her targeting computers struggled to track them all. Captain Johnson led the first wave of human fighters through the asteroid maze, his small squadron weaving between chunks of rock and ice while alien sensor sweeps searched for targets. The hegemony had expected to find human forces arranged in traditional battle formations, easy targets for their superior firepower, but instead found empty space punctuated by random weapons fire from seemingly impossible angles. Commander Jake Martinez took his heavily modified cruiser directly into the heart of the enemy formation, a maneuver so suicidal that even his own crew questioned his sanity. But madness was exactly what Lieutenant Carter had prescribed in her paradox protocols, and as Martinez's ship plunged through the hegemony lines, alien vessels struggled to respond to tactics that violated every principle of logical warfare. The first hegemony casualties came not from superior human technology, but from pure confusion as alien ships collided with each other trying to track targets that appeared and disappeared behind asteroids. Dr. Thompson monitored the battle from Earth, watching as the enemy's collective consciousness networks showed signs of strain when forced to process truly chaotic combat scenarios. Martinez's ship took devastating damage as alien weapons tore through its hull, but he pressed forward toward the largest enemy dreadnought, his quantum torpedoes armed and ready. The biological ship ahead of him pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, its living armor adapting to deflect human weapons. But Martinez had one advantage the aliens could not anticipate. He was willing to die to prove a point. The explosion when Martinez's ship collided with the hegemony dreadnought lit up the asteroid belt like a miniature star, sending shockwaves through both fleets that could be felt across light years. For the first time in over a millennium, a hegemony capital ship had been destroyed in combat. Its biological systems failing as quantum fire consumed it from within, Admiral White pressed the attack as alien forces reeled from the unprecedented loss, human ships emerging from behind asteroids to strike at confused enemy formations. The battle was still hopeless in terms of numbers, but the psychological impact of that first kill rippled through the hegemony fleet like a virus, introducing doubt into minds that had known only certainty. General Rodriguez coordinated ground defenses as hegemony forces began their assault on Mars, the red planet's thin atmosphere offering little protection against orbital bombardment. Human installations disappeared under alien fire, but the defenders had learned from the space battle above, using underground tunnels and unexpected tactics to strike back at landing forces. Captain Johnson found himself commanding the remnants of 3 different squadrons after their original leaders were killed in the opening minutes of battle. His makeshift fleet struck at hegemony supply vessels, targeting the biological support systems that kept the alien war machine functioning. Each successful hit taught humanity more about their enemies' vulnerabilities. The tide began to turn slightly when human forces started targeting the neural link nodes that connected hegemony ships to their collective consciousness network. Dr. Thompson had identified these as critical weak points, and when they were damaged, entire enemy formations would lose coordination and begin firing on each other. But the human victory was short-lived as the hegemony adapted to the new tactics, their biological ships evolving countermeasures in real time. Advanced alien vessels began hunting human fighters with terrifying efficiency, their living hulls sprouting new weapon systems designed specifically to counter human unpredictability. Admiral White made the difficult decision to withdraw surviving human forces as it became clear that the battle could not be won. 60% of the human fleet had been destroyed, along with most of the orbital defense platforms that protected Earth and Mars. The asteroid belt was littered with the wreckage of both human and alien vessels. However, the battle had achieved something more valuable than victory. It had proven that the hegemony could be hurt. Ambassador Zexthel S. reports back to the Alien Council spoke of human tactics that defied logical analysis, of warriors who fought as if death held no meaning for them. For the first time in their history, the hegemony had encountered true resistance. General Rodriguez transmitted his final message before going underground as hegemony ground forces occupied Mars. His words carried across human space, reaching every surviving settlement and outpost. Phase 1 was complete. The aliens now knew humanity could fight back, and the real war was just beginning. Dr. Thompson analyzed the battle data from her hidden laboratory, discovering that the hegemony's biological technology had one critical flaw. It required time to adapt to new threats. If humanity could maintain a constant stream of innovative tactics, they might be able to stay ahead of alien countermeasures long enough to find a way to win. The surviving human fleet regrouped at hidden bases scattered throughout the outer system, their crews working frantically to repair damaged ships and develop new weapons. Captain Johnson's vessel barely held together, but his crew refused to abandon the fight, knowing that every day they remained active was another day for humanity to prepare its defenses. As hegemony forces began landing on Earth itself, the underground resistance networks activated according to plans that had been decades in the making. The aliens expected quick surrender from a broken species, but instead found themselves facing an enemy that became more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. Ambassador Zexthel stood in the ruins of Geneva, his insectoid features reflecting confusion as he tried to understand why humans continued fighting despite overwhelming odds. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever inflicted such casualties on hegemony forces, and none had ever fought back after. Their main fleet was destroyed. 6 months after the hegemony invasion began, Earth appeared to be just another conquered world in their vast empire. Alien patrol craft swept across the skies daily while massive biomechanical garrisons controlled every major city. Their living walls pulsing with organic sensors that could detect human life from miles away. But beneath the surface of apparent defeat, Humanity was waging a very different kind of war. Colonel Ben Hayes emerged from the underground tunnels beneath New York, his face bearing the scars of constant fighting as he coordinated resistance activities across the globe. The network he commanded included former military officers, civilian volunteers, and anyone willing to fight for freedom, all connected by hidden communication lines that the aliens had not yet discovered. Major Susan Clark led a raid on a hegemony supply depot in what used to be Chicago, her team moving through abandoned subway tunnels that had been converted into a vast underground highway system. The aliens controlled the surface, but humanity owned the depths, using forgotten infrastructure and newly dug passages to strike without warning. Tony Rodriguez worked in his hidden workshop beneath Detroit, converting civilian equipment into weapons that could damage hegemony technology. The mechanic had become a master at improvisation, turning everything from kitchen appliances to construction tools into devices capable of disrupting alien biosystems. His innovations were copied and distributed through the resistance network. Dr. Thompson made her greatest breakthrough while working in a laboratory hidden beneath the ruins of Geneva, discovering that the hegemony's collective consciousness was not as unified as it appeared. Individual aliens could be separated from their network through targeted electromagnetic pulses, leaving them confused and vulnerable to human tactics. The resistance scored its first major victory when Hayes coordinated a simultaneous uprising across 12 major cities, catching the hegemony forces completely off guard. For 72 hours, human fighters reclaimed population centers, broadcasting messages of defiance to the world before being forced underground again by overwhelming alien reinforcements. Captain Johnson continued his space-based guerrilla campaign with a fleet of barely functional ships held together by spare parts and determination. His vessel had become a legend among both human and alien forces, appearing without warning to strike at hegemony supply lines before vanishing into the void. The aliens had assigned entire squadrons to hunt him down. The underground war took a darker turn when Ambassador Zexthal, under pressure from his superiors, authorized the use of biological weapons designed to make Earth uninhabitable for human life. Entire city blocks were consumed by alien organisms that converted organic matter into materials suitable for hegemony. Colonization. Hayes watched in horror as London disappeared beneath a writhing mass of biomechanical growth. The ancient city transformed into something that resembled a living nightmare. But even this atrocity only strengthened human resolve. As survivors streamed into the underground networks with nothing left to lose except their determination to fight, Major Clark discovered that the hegemony's biological weapons had an unexpected weakness. They required constant maintenance from specialized alien technicians. Her teams began targeting these support personnel, causing the bioweapons to malfunction and sometimes turn against their creators in spectacular fashion. Tony Rodriguez developed a new type of explosive that specifically targeted the neural networks connecting hegemony forces to their collective consciousness. When detonated near alien formations, these devices could sever the psychic links that made the enemy so effective, leaving individual aliens isolated and panicked. Dr. Thompson's research into hegemony biology revealed that their collective consciousness was maintained by quantum entanglement between specialized organs in each alien. If this entanglement could be disrupted on a large scale, it might be possible to disable entire armies without killing them, something that appealed to humanity's lingering hope for eventual peace. The resistance faced its greatest challenge when hegemony forces began implementing collective punishment protocols, destroying entire neighborhoods in retaliation for attacks against their forces. The moral burden of these casualties weighed heavily on resistance leaders, but surrender would mean the death of human civilization itself. Captain Sarah Mitchell transmitted an urgent message from the edge of known space, reporting that she had discovered something that could change the entire war. Her exploration fleet had found evidence of other species that had successfully resisted the hegemony, hidden colonies that had maintained their independence for centuries. Hayes coordinated the most ambitious resistance operation yet attempted, a coordinated strike against every major hegemony installation on Earth simultaneously. The plan required precise timing and enormous sacrifice, but success could cripple the alien occupation force and buy time for Mitchell's discoveries to make a difference. The operation began at dawn when resistance fighters emerged from underground networks across the globe, striking at hegemony garrisons with weapons that exploited every weakness Dr. Thompson had discovered. Biomechanical installations writhed and collapsed as their neural networks were severed, leaving alien forces blind and confused. Major Clark led the assault on the primary command center in Geneva, fighting through corridors that literally tried to digest her team while biomechanical defenses adapted to their weapons in real time. The battle was desperate and costly, but the intelligence they gathered would prove invaluable to the resistance movement. Tony Rodriguez's electromagnetic pulse weapons proved devastatingly effective against hegemony technology, disrupting the quantum entanglement systems that connected alien forces to their collective consciousness. Individual aliens experiencing independent thought for the first time in their lives began to question the war they were fighting. Dr. Thompson broadcast her neural cascade virus through captured hegemony communication networks, watching as the signal spread through their collective consciousness like a plague of individuality. The psychological impact on an enemy that had known only shared thought for millennia was profound and unexpected. The resistance operation succeeded beyond all expectations, crippling hegemony forces worldwide and proving that human determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. But the victory came at enormous cost, with thousands of resistance fighters killed and entire underground networks exposed to alien retaliation. As reports flowed in from the outer colonies, it became clear that humanity's desperate resistance had inspired something unprecedented in galactic history. Species across the galaxy were rising up against hegemony rule, encouraged by the impossible example of human defiance against overwhelming odds. Dr. Thompson's neural cascade virus reached its full potential 18 months after the invasion began, as the quantum-transmitted signal spread through hegemony collective consciousness networks across 3 star systems. The first field test had been conducted by Major Clark's team during their raid on the biological weapons facility, and the results exceeded every prediction Thompson had made about disrupting alien neural links. An entire hegemony division became catatonic within minutes of exposure to the virus. Their collective consciousness shattered as individual aliens experienced independent thought for the first time in their evolutionary history. The psychological shock was so profound that many aliens simply shut down completely, unable to process existence without the constant mental connection to their species. Captain Johnson prepared for what he knew would be his final mission, leading a desperate assault on the main hegemony fleet using a captured alien vessel and a plan so audacious it bordered on complete insanity. Lieutenant Carter's tactical expertise had been crucial in developing the infiltration strategy, but even she admitted the chances of success were minimal at best. The enemy flagship was a massive, but biomechanical construct that stretched for kilometers, its living hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication system and sensory array. Johnson's team fought through corridors that literally tried to digest them, facing biological defenses that adapted to their weapons with terrifying speed. Meanwhile, Captain Mitchell returned from the galactic rim with news that would change everything about humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. The hegemony's rule was not as absolute as they had claimed, and their 3,000-year reign of terror had been opposed by hidden enclaves of free species calling themselves the Liberation Front. The fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Earth represented something the galaxy had not seen in millennia: a genuine coalition of species united against hegemony tyranny. Advanced technology from dozens of civilizations combined with human tactical innovation created a force that the aliens had never imagined possible. General Rodriguez emerged from the underground tunnels beneath Geneva with an army of hardened resistance fighters, their faces bearing the scars of 18 months of desperate warfare. The neural cascade virus had weakened hegemony ground forces significantly, leaving gaps in their defenses that human forces could exploit with devastating effectiveness. The planetary assault began at dawn, as human forces reclaimed their homeworld. city by city, fighting through biomechanical installations that writhed and collapsed as their neural networks were severed. Liberation Front technology provided air support, while human determination and knowledge of local terrain proved decisive in ground combat. Ambassador Zexthel experienced the neural cascade effects firsthand as his own implants malfunctioned, severing his connection to the collective consciousness for the first time in his life. The sensation of individual thought was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously, forcing him to question everything he had believed about hegemony, superiority, and the righteousness of their cause. Admiral White emerged from hidden asteroid shipyards with a secret fleet that had been under construction since the invasion began, vessels built using both human engineering and technology provided by Liberation Front allies. The ships were smaller than hegemony dreadnoughts but faster and more maneuverable, designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien tactics. The space battle above Earth raged across 3 dimensions as human and Liberation Front forces struck at hegemony formations with coordinated precision. Thompson's neural cascade virus spread through enemy ships like wildfire, disrupting their collective consciousness and leaving individual vessels isolated and vulnerable. Captain Johnson's infiltration team reached the core of the hegemony flagship, where they discovered the central neural processing unit that coordinated the entire invasion fleet. The biological computer was a massive organism that had been grown over centuries, its neural pathways containing the accumulated tactical knowledge of the hegemony's conquest of hundreds of worlds. Lieutenant Carter worked frantically to upload the neural cascade virus directly into the alien command system, while Johnson's team held off biological defenses that swarmed through the ship's corridors like living antibodies. The upload process required precise timing and enormous sacrifice, but success would cripple the entire hegemony. War Machine. Dr. Thompson monitored the virus propagation from her laboratory on Earth, watching as the cascade effects spread through hegemony networks faster than their biological systems could adapt. Individual aliens across the galaxy were experiencing independent thought for the first time, and many were choosing to abandon the collective consciousness entirely. The psychological impact on hegemony forces was devastating as their 3,000-year-old certainty about their superiority crumbled in the face of human resistance and Liberation Front technology. Species that had been conquered generations ago suddenly remembered what freedom felt like and began rising up against their oppressors. Major Clark led the final assault on the Hegemony Command Center in Geneva, fighting through defenses that had been weakened by the neural cascade virus but remained dangerous to unprepared attackers. The battle was brutal and costly. The human forces had learned to exploit every weakness in alien technology during their long underground war. Tony Rodriguez's electromagnetic pulse weapons proved even more effective against confused and isolated hegemony forces, disrupting the quantum entanglement systems that had made them so formidable. Individual aliens, cut off from their collective consciousness, found themselves unable to coordinate effectively or adapt to human tactics. The tide of battle turned decisively when Admiral White's secret fleet arrived to support the Liberation Front assault on the main hegemony armada. Human ships struck at enemy formations with tactics that no logical military computer could predict, while Allied vessels provided the heavy firepower needed to destroy alien dreadnoughts. Captain Johnson's final transmission echoed across all communication frequencies as his dying ship prepared to ram the hegemony flagship, carrying the neural cascade virus directly into the enemy command structure. His words would be remembered by humans and aliens alike. This is humanity. We don't surrender, we don't submit, and we don't forget. The explosion that followed lit up the space around Earth like a second sun as the hegemony flagship collapsed under the weight of its own failing biological systems. Across the galaxy, alien forces felt the cascade effect spread through their networks, offering individual choice to beings who had never known anything but collective thought. The final battle raged across 3 star systems as the hegemony committed every reserve fleet to crush the human rebellion once and for all, but they were no longer fighting just humanity. Species across the galaxy had risen up, inspired by the impossible example of human defiance against overwhelming odds. And the neural cascade virus had given countless aliens the gift of individual thought. Dr. Thompson's creation spread through hegemony collective consciousness networks like a benevolent plague, not destroying the aliens but offering them something they had never experienced, the choice to think for themselves. The psychological impact was devastating to a civilization that had known only shared consciousness for thousands of years. General Rodriguez stood in the liberated command center of Geneva, watching as hegemony forces across Earth laid down their weapons in confusion and surrender. Many aliens were experiencing individual emotions for the first time, and the sensation was so overwhelming that they simply stopped fighting, unable to process existence without the constant mental connection to their species. Colonel Hayes coordinated the final liberation of Earth's major cities, his resistance fighters emerging from underground tunnels to find hegemony garrisons in complete disarray. The neural cascade virus had severed the connections that made alien forces so effective, leaving individual creatures that were lost and frightened rather than conquering warriors. Ambassador Zexthel made the decision that would change galactic history when he formally requested peace negotiations, becoming the first hegemony official to act independently of the collective consciousness. His neural implants had been permanently damaged by the cascade virus, but instead of viewing this as a tragedy, he had come to see it as liberation. The peace talks that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, with individual aliens sitting across from human and Liberation Front representatives as equals rather than as members of a conquering collective. The terms being discussed were very different from those offered 2 years earlier during the original ultimatum. President Bell stood in the rebuilt halls of the United Nations, addressing not just humanity but the entire galaxy through quantum communication networks that now carried messages of hope rather than conquest. Her words echoed across thousands of worlds where former hegemony subjects were experiencing freedom for the first time in generations. Major Clark led the recovery efforts in cities that had been damaged by biomechanical weapons, working alongside former hegemony technicians who were now free to choose cooperation over conquest. The healing process would take years, but the willingness of former enemies to work together gave everyone hope for the future. Captain Mitchell commanded the first joint Human Liberation Front exploration vessel, heading toward uncharted regions of space to seek out other species that might need help achieving freedom from various forms of oppression. The galaxy was vast, and there were certainly other civilizations struggling against tyranny in distant corners of known space. Tony Rodriguez found himself working with alien engineers to develop new technologies that could heal worlds damaged by centuries of war, his natural talent for improvisation proving invaluable when combined with advanced alien knowledge. The partnership between human creativity and alien technology was producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Thompson established research facilities where human and former hegemony scientists worked together to understand the long-term effects of the neural cascade virus, ensuring that aliens who chose independence could maintain their individuality while still cooperating with their former collective consciousness members when desired. The transformation of galactic civilization was not without its challenges, as many species struggled to adapt to freedom after generations of hegemony rule. Human advisors worked with Liberation Front representatives to help establish new governments and social structures that respected individual rights while maintaining necessary cooperation. Admiral White took command of the newly formed Galactic Defense Alliance, an organization dedicated to protecting the freedom of all species and preventing any future attempts at galactic conquest. The alliance included humans, Liberation Front members, and former hegemony species who had chosen independence. Over collective consciousness, 5 years after the war ended, the galaxy was unrecognizable from what it had been under hegemony rule. Free trade flourished between independent worlds, scientific cooperation accelerated technological development, and artistic expression bloomed as species shared their unique cultures with neighbors who had once been enemies. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of her exploration vessel, watching as her mixed crew of humans and aliens worked together to chart new regions of space. The sight would have been impossible under hegemony rule, but now represented the new reality of a galaxy where cooperation was chosen rather than enforced. The memorial on Earth honoring those who died in the resistance bore the names of humans and aliens alike, recognizing that freedom had been won through the sacrifice of beings from dozens of species. Captain Johnson's name held a place of honor, remembered as the man who delivered the neural cascade virus to the heart of hegemony power. Ambassador Zextel, now serving as a diplomatic liaison between former hegemony species and the Galactic Defense Alliance, often reflected on how the war had changed him personally. The collective consciousness had provided certainty and purpose, but individual thought offered something more valuable: the ability to choose what kind of being he wanted to become. Dr. Thompson's research continued as she worked to understand how the neural cascade virus had affected different species, finding that while the transition to individual thought was difficult, most aliens adapted successfully and reported greater satisfaction with their lives than they had experienced under collective consciousness. The final scene of humanity's great struggle played out in a research station orbiting a world that had been devastated by hegemony bioweapons, where human and alien scientists worked together to restore the planet's ecosystem. Their cooperation represented everything the war had been fought to achieve: the right for all beings to choose their own destiny. President Bell's final address to the galaxy 5 years after victory summarized the lesson learned through humanity's desperate resistance. Peace cannot be imposed by force but must be chosen freely by all parties involved. The hegemony had offered peace on their terms, but the galaxy had chosen peace on everyone's terms instead, and that had made all the difference in creating a truly lasting harmony among the stars.